Hi guys, it's great to be back. Here we have Todd on my right. I am glad that we have so many viewers, and also last stream we have over 1,000 hits. So it's pretty amazing that this is a new thing for us, and basically it's going pretty well. So I will let Todd introduce himself and chat about little.
Oh yeah. Hey everybody. Thanks for joining us. Wish I could be meeting all of you guys in person. I was really looking forward to going to Skopje, excuse me. But hopefully everybody is well and safe and is keeping everybody else safe. Let's hope that video game making in caves is helping save the world, I guess. If you guys want to reach out to me, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm not on the social networks all that much, so and I'll check it once every couple times a year or something. Now, hopefully, I can get back to you sooner than that. But yeah, hit me up if you guys have any questions or anything.
Perfect. So we are going to start with the stream after the break. So we're going to take a 30 seconds break, and Todd will start the stream.
All right. Again, welcome everybody. My name is Todd. I was the art director on Apex Legends. Currently, I'm the look dev supervisor, just focused purely on making the game look better by any means necessary. Apex Legends does have the distinction of being the highest first month sales of any free-to-play game ever. I know Call of Duty is breathing down our neck right now. They're pacing pretty well to beat us, but we'll see. We'll see if we can hold on to that title here. And that data is according to Super Data, so feel free to check the stats after the show. And rather than me explaining what Apex is, let me just throw the trailer on here. We'll just watch that for a little bit.
Approaching drop zone. You not get the message from the moment that I'm stepping in and get a couple weapons. Yeah, I turn to a beast when I'm repping. Ready up. It's my time, dog. I'm on my way to become an icon. Good luck, brothers. Get to the level that I'm on. I am the greatest of all time, man, and I won't stop to build the whole world up in my hand. I can't see my rising from the horizon. Get ready. Together. Let's go. I have fallen. Run to help. The hunt begins. I'm a living legend. Scanning the area. Champion double kill. I'm a living legend. You ain't heard yet, you not get the message. Zip line deployed. Sorry you died. I'm a living legend. You ain't heard yet, you not get the message. Shots fired. Sending out my decoy. Hi. This is where it ends.
All right, so Apex is not our team's first hit, and we often get asked, just how do you guys keep making these great games with a small team in a short amount of time? And the first thing that always pops into my head is the story of how Respawn got its logo. So let me take you back a couple games before Apex, and then we'll come back up to Apex. So Titanfall, Respawn's first game, we were entering kind of into the final stages of getting that game ready to come out the door, and we needed a logo. Not the game logo the company logo for the name Respawn. So there's about a dozen of us all huddled around, and you have deadlines looming, and I'm sure that's familiar to most. And we had it narrowed down to about 10 or so, and we needed to come out of that meeting with one. And so we're discussing what we liked about each, weighing the merits and whatnot, and we kept doubling back to this one. I really liked it. A lot of us really liked it. It's bold, simple design. It alluded to gaming because it's reminiscent of a die for like a board game or whatever. The 4 dots make an R in Braille, so that's cool. And Braille is for the visually impaired, so it's the language that you touch. And that part didn't seem to make a lot of sense to upper management because we make a visual product. But then someone said something that really resonated with the whole room, and that was, yeah, it makes sense because we make games that feel good. We got some brows raised and some nods, and with that, we really cemented the company logo for the foreseeable future. The story says a few things about us. One is we care deeply about the UX, the user experience. How does the game feel? Almost too much in this case, right? We focused so much on it that we deprioritized our company logo till the very end of the project. So we needed to have one. And just to explain how we think about user experience, it's not about having the best graphics or the best audio or story or even design. It's how they all work together. Another impression that this meeting left on me personally is that management didn't need to be right. They empowered us to come up with a logo that served a dual purpose, which is another part of at least my ethos, and we'll get into that a little bit later. So another thing is, who are the people in this room? Why do I care about these people? So there's me. Hopefully you care about me. I was just an environment artist at the time. I've been making video games since Tony Hawk Underground. That was like 17 years ago. And most of the people I had worked with since 2006 on Modern Warfare at Infinity Ward. And before that, a lot were responsible for Call of Duty 1 and 2, and way back, Medal of Honor, Allied Assault, so all big games in their own right. Modern Warfare had about 90-ish people for our in-house creative dev team, and that was the obvious breakout success that made it a household name. And it's most importantly where I met my wife, who you'll probably hear her trying to wrangle our children downstairs, having to do the stream from the house. So hopefully you'll hear them shriek later. And then on to Modern Warfare 2, our team ramped up a little bit to 110-ish for the in-house creative dev, and that really obviously cemented that Call of Duty as the multi-billion-dollar franchise that it is now. So then we all branched off and started Respawn. And a Respawn, for those of you who don't play a lot of first-person shooter games, is when you run around shooting, and if you get killed, when you come back to life, we call that a respawn. So that's kind of what we did as a company. So it felt like a fitting name. Our first game out the door was Titanfall 1. It had 70-ish or so in-house creative devs. And, I mean, we started with nothing, like just a bunch of folding chairs in a circle. I think there was, like, glass on the floor. Like, that's a pretty nice stain on the floor there. But we're just kind of squatting in this building, just thinking up of what we wanted to make. So, Titanfall 1 did well at establishing a new franchise and really set us up for the sequel, Titanfall 2. We had about 120-ish for our in-house creative team there. And that's starting to get big for us. That's the biggest we'd ever been. And Titanfall 2 has a critically acclaimed single-player story. If you're on lockdown, it's a great game to play. It's a short and sweet 6-hour run, and you won't regret it, I promise. So that brings us up to Apex Legends. Now we grew even a little bit bigger, 130 for our in-house creative dev team. And it made that 50 million players in the first month. Just a lot of players. And just to talk about what Apex Legends is a little bit more. It wasn't clear in the video, but it's a free-to-play game, so you can just download it now. Another thing to play, I'm just going to plug everything. It's a great game, to play for free. It's first-person shooter, so you're playing from the perspective of the character that you're controlling. It's squad-based battle royale, so 60 players drop in. One team leaves victorious, and it has a variety of characters with different abilities that allow for really cool interplay, gameplay, and teamwork. So out of those 130, 40 of those were artists. And towards the end of the project, we had a handful of artists. And I still consider this a small team, because when you compare it to similarly successful teams, those teams can range from like 300 to like 600, just massive teams. So our team is still fairly lean. And it remains a happy and healthy franchise to this date. And you have a hit title on your hands when you have your very own line of genuine knockoffs. So, getting back to the question, how do we do it? I'm the one telling the story, so it's going to be from an artist's perspective, and we'll talk about just all the culture and the art strategy that fits inside of that culture. And then we're going to sprinkle in some tips and tricks along the way, like some happy little bushes. Bob Ross is my hero. So our culture, this is the whole team of Apex, not just the art culture. But I break it down into 3 different parts. These aren't written down anywhere, but they are demonstrated frequently. They're not really absolutes, but I feel like it does a pretty good job on the whole representing the Apex team's culture. And we're not perfect. I'm certainly not perfect, but I do believe in these values, and I try to hold myself to them, and I try to instill them into the art team, and with varying degrees of success. So on the Apex team, we are respectful, disciplined, and resourceful. These are real vague, so let me break those down a little bit. So under respect, we respect our employees. We try our hardest not to schedule in any crunch. I don't know if I guess we have like a week of crunch before, but we try not to. We try to give our employees as much autonomy as possible. And really, it just, in this time where a lot of controversy swirls around the poor industry working conditions, I feel like Respawn is a gold standard that I'm very proud of. And it has other benefits to it, too. It's not just totally altruistic, and we'll get into those later. We also have respect for our peers, right? So when we're working with other people in a creative environment, respect is the foundation in which to give open critique. You can't be open and honest with people until there's respect there. We also try not to have a tribes mentality where it's like, oh, it's my art team and I'm only looking out for them. It's like, no, we're making a game. We have to respect all the other departments and work as a game development team. We respect our competition. As Dudley says, keep it classy for all you Street Fighter fans out there. And we try to respect our players, right? Like, we want to give them meaningful experiences that really exercise their brain and not exploit it. This is also a good place to mention whenever I'm talking about the team. Sometimes I refer to them as the guys, but I'm referring to the men and the women on the team. It's a habit that I have from the old days where it was only guys, but we now have about, I think, like 15%, close to 15% of the art department is made up of women. So we're always looking to get that number up. So please send in your resumes. So we're also, part of our culture is being disciplined. So, we're a disciplined group, and I know a lot of people on the stream right now have a lot of talent and are disciplined in their own right, but let me talk about how we're disciplined as a small team. And scope if you've already guessed it, is one of them. We're not afraid to cut. So rather than stagnate, we scope. This means you want to get into the habit of shipping games versus pushing deadlines out indefinitely to have things fit in. And I feel like the most drastic example I can give is on Titanfall, where we just didn't have a single player. We were about 3.5 years in. We didn't want to take forever to come out and get left behind by the industry, so we made a choice to cut single player, just cut the game right in half. It was only a multiplayer game. And it's that open, honest, and often just merciless scoping process that prevents that feature creep. So if you have a great idea towards the end of the project, you better watch out, because it's going to get axed. We have a saying of save it for the sequel. Save it for the next season now that I guess we're a shipping. We also stick to our long-term strategy. We're very disciplined in that we're not tempted to schedule in that crunch, right? Or go into a hiring frenzy. We feel like this hurts us in the long run, and we're believers in a sustainable dev practice. And we want to really retain the team that knows the engine, knows the process, knows the culture, knows each other. All of these things pay dividends later on down the road. And we're also disciplined about bug reporting. So, really, really, bug reporting? That's what makes great games? Yeah, absolutely. So we have a fairly hefty size internal testing team, but all departments do a lot of testing to understand the game, know the game, and more importantly, we're always bugging the game. We have a quick button. We make it super easy to bug things. And you can, if you're from the movies, this is kind of like your dailies in the movies. It kind of lets you know what the state of the game is, and you want to keep the game fun, and the game isn't fun unless it doesn't have too many bugs in it. And one thing that will happen in the room is, like, you'll be sitting there playing it, and some bug will happen. You're like, that makes me mad that happened or whatever. And the guy next to you will typically say, like, well, did you bug it? And, that's the worst when it happens to me. I'm like, yeah, I forgot. Because you just get caught up in the moment. But it's important to not just complain about it, but actually assert, and that way it can get fixed. We're also disciplined about our in-game efficiency. So we call this death by 1,000 cuts. At least in art, it's very easy to make textures or geometry at a higher resolution because it looks really good when you get super close to it. You're like, oh yeah, that's awesome. And you may never even see it at that detail when you're in the game. So we know that the hammer will fall. You'll run out of memory, or you'll want to put in more assets. It's like now in the age of texture streaming and model streaming, people are like, oh, well, we have streaming. But I mean, a lot of times I see just ugly blobs pop in first, and to me that's almost even worse, at least for the user experience. Again, we're always thinking about the user, how best to serve that. And we're also disciplined about being game developers first. Again, we're not there to just make our portfolios better. We're there to make a great game, and our portfolios should be a byproduct of that. Oh, here's my super fancy graph, just to tie it all together. This is my super scientific project completion graph. Yeah, I ripped the image off the internet, sorry. But you can see here that the last stage is the most critical. That's where everything comes together. You see that goal up there. When you're in the middle of the project, it looks like you're just never going to hit it. But you can hit it. You just have to be doing all of those things above, right? You have to scope. Make sure you're scoping the game right. You have to make sure that everyone on your team knows the process, knows the engine, knows each other, knows what to expect. You've been keeping the game healthy throughout. You don't have a bunch of bugs that are going to need to get fixed at the last moment. And you're keeping your assets efficient along the way. So keep your eye on the prize. It is natural in that mid phase when that deadline is rushing at you to freak out, but you got to hold the line, be brave, and trust that the plan's going to work. And we also try to be resourceful. So using all parts of the buffalo as our expression. So like the Native Americans on the Great Plains, it wasn't just for food. It was they used every part from the nose to the tail. Like nothing was wasted. And sometimes our development assets can get cut when you're trying to find fun and you're going different directions, but we're always looking for ways to reuse them. Wraith is a great example. In a former life, she was just a red shirt, just a faceless enemy to shoot on an unshipped project that I'm not going to talk about. But we gave her a face, so you can get a lot more personality out of her. And we made some minor tweaks to show off her source of power, which also is really helpful when you're in a class-based game. So here you can see we ripped the helmet off. We put little nubs on her that almost kind of look like studs that you would see on a biker jacket. And then coursed that interdimensional phase energy across it to help show off her powers. So just real quick changes, and boom, we had the full-fledged character for the eighth of the cost, at least on the modeling side. There are some other costs that you typically pay elsewhere trying to make the character work, but for the art side, it was a huge win. So always keep a lookout. So we just typically have a bang for the buck mentality. Like, how can you get the most out of each asset? And a good example, this is somewhat standard, but a good example is like just combo systems or modular systems. So on the left, you have a transmission tower. On the right, you have the artillery battery. These are two different locations that share 90% of the assets, but those landmarks give the two bases just totally different contexts and different purposes. And just as a quick tip, if you have a map, it's really helps the players project those different meanings onto the same assets in the different locations. Another great example, just to gloss over it, these are we call them gladiator cards internally, but they're legend banners, which is something that a player can unlock different banners for their character, and those show up in the game, like when you're in first place or when you have the most kills or whatever. So kind of to show off, and we call that peacocking. But here you can see we're combining different elements. So on the center and the right, we have the same pose that drives the lighting directions, and then the borders are different. So you can see that the borders are driving the color palette of that. So decoupling the pose and the borders allows us to have more stuff for you to unlock. So it was a tricky and complicated thing to pull off, but it ended up paying off nicely just because we have twice as many things to unlock now. So know your engine. It's one of your biggest resources. So make sure that you know that thing inside and out. Play to its strengths. Learn to squeeze the most out of it. Know how to hack it. We do a lot of hacking. I believe video game making is like 90% hacking. But knowing your engine really allows you to make the right calls on getting the most bang for the buck. And then this is also where that long-term strategy of employee retention really pays off, especially on an engine like ours that's proprietary and has a lot of nuances to it. Maybe if you're in Unreal or not, you can jump from team to team. I don't know. But for us, keeping our employees there, knowing the engine really helps. A good example of this is wind in our game. So Robert Taviar, environment art director, he got wind the Respawn way. He just hacked it in, got it as close as he could, discovered what he needed from code, which was just like turning the vertex normals from local space to world space or something. So he saw an opportunity to make a big impact on the appeal and the liveliness of the game, without really bogging down the code department. So you got to remember that the engine really dictates pretty much everything. Like, it dictates art, it even dictates design to a large extent. You know, you're looking at Kings Canyon right here. When we first started making Battle Royale maps for Apex, they had that typical like rolling hills that you see in other Battle Royale games, and we quickly realized that we weren't going to be able to do that because our engine is not good at rendering the whole map at once. So just for some reference, Kings Canyon is 16 times bigger than any multiplayer map we had made previously on Titanfall in the engine. So we ended up playing to our strengths, right? Like, rolling hills aren't going to work. So what our engine does do well is occluders. And for those of you who don't know what an occluder is, it's basically like a plane or a low-res piece of geometry that can keep things from rendering on the other side of it. So they're just giant blocks that look ugly. And so we've hidden them inside of all of those mountains that you're looking at on the screen. And so now you know why our first map is called Kings Canyon, because we needed to have those canyon type walls in place. And if you've ever wondered what an occluder looks like, it's like, well, if it's supposed to be blocking light, is it a black hole? What is it? I don't know what it is. So you can see here, like, the inside of this wall is the occluder, and it's a disco party. Turns out, some people have claimed to see the face of God looking into that for too long. So be careful. Just real quick tips. The mountains are really good for performance, but they also help control composition. So as a artist, it really helps us frame the things that you need to be focused on. So we call these gaps between the occluders bottlenecks, which is a gameplay term, but they act as reveals, right? As the player comes around the corner or crests the hill, they're going to be fairly limited and at where they can be and what direction they're going to be looking. So ideally it shows you your options when you step into a scene. So right here you have the centerpiece. You could definitely go there, get some loot. There's a road off to the left where it's like, okay, I'm going to bypass that, go left, or I can go right. So another thing is, whenever you step into compositions, you always want to talk about rule of thirds. Use them everywhere. It's the approximation of the golden ratio, and I always get made fun of for just hammering home, like, put it on a third, just make it a third of this size, Like, we use it from composition on the thirds, but even like rocks and trees, if you scale them, put a rock 1/3 the size next to a regular size rock or whatever. I mean, this goes down to pebbles and twigs and your textures. It's just it works. It's just so much more pleasing on the eye, and works just kind of on this fractal nature. So it feels like a cheat code sometimes, where you're just like, I'm having a problem getting this to look good, and then you just start thinking of it in terms of thirds, and it just instantly looks better. That all works except for on the composition horizons. So typically when a concept artist is making a concept piece, they'll want to put that horizon on the third because we're trained to put everything on the thirds. But the player is going to be training on the horizon or wherever the target is. So you have to, whenever you're composing the scene, just keep that in mind. You can't just blindly follow the rule of thirds. And while we're on the topic of interactive composition, I would highly recommend this book, 101 Things I Learned in Architecture School. There's a huge correlation between video games and architecture. Each page is just like a super simple lesson. It's often like one line, and so it's really easy to remember. Usually has little drawings, good for us artists. So I definitely recommend checking that one out. So hopefully this paints a picture of how we think as a small game dev team, or at least gives you a nice wash or a foundation for laying down some juicy art direction strategy details with a fan brush, obviously. So it's an art director's job to get the most out of the team, and part of that strategy is removing roadblocks. So yeah, we have typical dedicated time to get feedback from artists on issues that are slowing them down so that we can speed them up. But also, as an art director, you can't solve every creative problem that the game has by yourself. So don't become the roadblock yourself by trying to solve everything. Really entrust your team to push in the direction that you've set. And again, this is where that long-term hires really pay off. You keep guys around long enough, you all know how each other thinks. And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I know what he's going for. So that's really helpful. So unblock artists. Fix on fail. My friend Brian Scott, he's a Disney animator who worked on a lot of features and shorts at Disney. And he just had a baby like 3 hours ago. It's crazy. We have his kids downstairs while they're recovering from it. Anyways, he shared this phrase with me, fix on fail, that they used a lot on their shorts, and I feel it fits us perfectly. So it just means, does the asset meet all of the directives? Is it hitting the quality? Is it hitting the tone, readability, whatever you have set up? But if it's not quite exactly what you were envisioning, just let it roll. Like, it's going to make your team way more efficient. It's going to empower them. It's going to get them invested in the project more. But make sure you are giving that feedback too. Like, you want to let them know why it's not quite hitting your vision. So you're still coaching the artists along so that you're refining it as you go. And I think the craziest example of fix on fail, is this drives me nuts, is Star Wars. Like, why did they not make Darth Vader's laser cannons match his lightsaber? The lightsaber's red and the laser cannons are green. Like, stop the presses. We need to have a stronger visual connection between the two. It's like, nope. Just doesn't meet the directives. Viewer understand that it's Darth Vader's ship. It shoots lasers. Move on. So a master knows when their work is complete, or another way to think about it is that they know what they can get away with. Another part of our art direction strategy is to work in parallel. So this means, like, for the environments, you don't want to start arting on top of what the designer is making before it's fun, because a lot of rework is going to happen. And you don't want to wait until the designer is fully done, because the map is going to take a lot longer to produce, and possibly art won't even have anything to work on. So our approach is art and design agree on a general direction, in this case a frozen city. And so on the right, you'll see the designer is iterating on it, trying to find the fun. And if you look on the left side, art is working on detailing and defining the style for the area. And then once design is confident in that fun, art will go in and propagate that style over the top. And you get this. Looks awesome, plays awesome, and just feels awesome to play in. So continuing on, we have overlapping skill sets. We try not to pigeonhole our artists. We don't have dedicated texture artists or geo artists, and this makes us very agile, which is important when you're working in a game that is evolving and trying to find that fun. I always think of us like in Jurassic Park, the Gallimimus, when they're running all in one direction, and it's, wait, no, we need to shift directions, and then you turn, and then you all start to run in the other direction all at the same time. It just means there's no artist waiting down the pipeline. You're not waiting for a geo guy to finish so that a texture artist isn't waiting for a geo artist to finish. We can all just pick up and start moving in the new direction. So overlapping skill sets. And last but not least, we use a lot of real-world reference and inspiration. Star Wars did it. We do it. You can too. This is like crazy just looking at the Star Wars stuff where it's like, oh yeah, that is just straight up World War II gun that they plopped some things onto. And it just adds a level of reliability, authenticity, takes less concept time, and allows even the production artist to make improvisations if, like, let's say the scope is blocking too much view and it's not fun to play. They know how to modify it on the fly. So Kit Bash for the win. And I know I'm saying using Star Wars as a reference a lot, but I feel like I can get away with that because we have shipped a Star Wars game at Respawn. While you're locked in your house, be sure to check out Jedi Fallen Order. I played through it. It's, I think, probably the best adventure Star Wars game I've ever played. So definitely hit that up. Again, I'm just going to shamelessly plug everything Respawn. Okay, back to real-world references. Here's a couple good examples of us doing that, like the sights, the muzzle brakes, the construction methods, all that stuff. It just makes it feel more believable, and in our case, we want it to feel like it looks tougher. It's got a nice, good, tough look to it. So great work, weapon artists. So all of this helps us be agile and keep productive on that small team. You know, we're on a small team trying to find that fun. So got to be agile. And on Apex, we took some big turns trying to find the fun. Again, we're coming off of Titanfall 2 solo campaign, which is highly revered. The audiences really liked it, but a majority of them are kind of shifting away from that type of game. And so we needed to mix it up in a big way with Apex, and we didn't want it to stagnate. So we made some big changes as we started on the Apex project. So let me talk about kind of how those giant swings impacted the basics of art direction on Apex. So I'm breaking down the basics into tone, identity, appeal, and readability. Tone was a huge challenge for us on the project. We completely changed genres over to Battle Royale. Even our business model changed from free-to-play, and that just had huge implications on the art team. That sort of business model really demanded a totally different way of doing things, and something that we had never done before, which is player expression. So on the left, you have your Pathfinder. That's your base default version. We can express his personality and tap into his utility robot backstory. But then you look at the Pathfinder on the right, and he's all looking super snazzy, like inspired by a superbike or something. But it has nothing to do with the character at all. But it expresses that player's personality. So we had two totally different art direction agendas, one for world building and setting the tone, and the other one for our progression content or player expression. So let's talk about that progression content, because that was the more challenging one for us. And Plague Doctor, this was made pre-coronavirus. I'm sorry. I'm just realizing that right now. So what is progression content? So just for those of you who don't know, Apex, again, is a free game. And the more you play, the more you level up, the more you progress through the game, the more cosmetics or content you unlock. Again, we don't have content that allows you to be have an advantage over other players. So it's all cosmetic content. And you can fast track this by unlocking, and you can unlock stuff by spending real money, which we call microtransactions. So here you can just see the store, kind of how you can purchase things in that store. This is anything from character variations, weapon variations, and other items. And you can just randomly get them unlocked for you just by playing. You don't have to pay for anything. But players want to express themselves however they want with this content. Playing as the base character is actually an uncommon preference. So basically, if you've already seen the movie Ready Player One, that's the sort of world we live in, right? Like they're in the same space, but there's all these disparate themes and styles going on inside of it. And the only thing that really keeps our progression content cohesive is that all the assets have the same art and rendering style, which is borrowed from the rest of the game. So progression content was a big shock to our team. Like we as artists are there to, tell that visual story. But we continue to learn how to engage our fans and give them what they're looking for. And one thing we learned for sure is that people like shiny as much as craps, apparently. Like, that is, the shinier the better. But shiny isn't everything. If players want to express themselves, the content does have to have some sort of meaning. If you can have both, great. But having that meaning is really what we call an alternative fantasy, and these fantasies range wildly. The base wraith on the left, that's made in-house to make sure that she fits the story, she's on tone, she works for gameplay. And the center and the right, they don't fit the story or the tone, but they get players super pumped. So we're adding value wherever we can, right? We do try to keep the identifying key features across the characters. So in this case, we have that scarf or that mass around the neck. We try to maintain that through, keeping her hair up, have her in form-fitting clothes. And you can bend these rules a little bit, but you have to see how everything works together. Again, it's about that user experience. You need the context. So she has a really strong run cycle with her. She does the ninja run with her arms back sort of thing. So that really helps her identity when you're trying to identify who you're about to engage with. So you have to make sure you see it in context before you know it's working or not. Okay, so that's for the characters, or for the progression content. Now we're moving on to the world building tone. So remember, we had progression content tone and world building tone. So on the left, you can see this is the two games we made previously in the same universe as Apex. So this is Titanfall 1 and 2, and we ended up with the ones on the right. And the way we did that is by defining just guardrails for people to work within, and we try to do that as fast as possible, right? Like, get them going in the right direction. So our goal right out of the gate was to find a different tone. Like, the serious tone of the Titanfall franchise just had to go. Like, we had to get rid of the seriousness of it. It needed to be a bit more lighthearted. But where does it go? How far do you take it? So Todd Alderman, our creative director, got input from a bunch of members of the team on where we wanted to take it. We used a lot of pop culture references as touchstones. It's just very quick vocabulary for us to all be able to understand quickly what we're thinking. And we just listed them all out. And so that's what you see on the left there, is like us trying to figure all of that out. And then on the right, you can see we wanted to make sure we were defining the negative space also. So stay away from these other things. And you can see on that the purple box, that was kind of the sweet spot that we wanted to try to land in. And this helped us quickly and efficiently just kind of loosely define the tone of the game. But we still needed to really zero in on it. So here's some pages that I ripped out of the tone direction doc that I made. You'll notice that it's a different format now. But we needed to, for me, a big question was like, why are we fighting in this game? Why do I care? And we quickly realized we didn't want it to feel like that oppressive, battle royale, the Japanese battle royale game or the Hunger Games where you're just like forced to fight sort of thing. We wanted to feel excited and celebrated at the end of the round. Just experience that glory and glamour of a gladiator. But then we wanted to contrast that with that intense, gritty action that we like. So we ended up calling that the grit and the glamour, and that was a touchstone that really helped external people quickly understand what we were trying to go for. And we try to reuse as much tone from the Titanfall universe as possible. The environments was a good place for that. The tonal direction pretty much stayed the same from Titanfall 2. You know, make it epic with the strange attractor. Always make it harsh. Something like this part of the world, you're out on the frontier, like bad stuff goes down out there. But then romanticize that, like juxtapose that tragic event with beauty. So just when you're romanticizing something, you can have a desert, and it can be a Lawrence of Arabia desert, which is beautiful, or you can have a Generation Kill. I don't know if you've seen that HBO special, but it's like Iraqi war. It's just like a desert that you would never, ever want to go to. So we always are biased towards making it feel more beautiful and pleasant to play in. And we kind of have that same philosophy with our characters too, right? So we want them to be aspirational. We don't want them to be perfectly beautiful. You know, some bad stuff goes down in that environment. So you're going to end up with characters that are a little imperfect. And that's really where we find the interest, is in their flaws, right? So characters are similar to environments in that way. And eventually we landed on this cool slider technique for communication. So you could tell, like on previous, on Titanfall, we were a lot more of that militaristic tone, and we've shifted it away to give it a little bit more personality for our characters. But we're still trying to be mindful of our industry neighbors and not getting too close to them, having our own voice, if you will. And we use these sort of sliders for all sorts of things. So zeroed in on how the squads would interact with each other. You know, we wanted a healthy dose of banter to keep things light. Here you can see we didn't want to go full Avengers. Maybe we have by now, I don't know. But that's where we started. We wanted to get away from the jargon and Titanfall 2 and more into the lighter stuff. Another example is, how do we want to portray violence? Like we wanted to be a team game, because you want to cast that net as wide as possible when you're a free-to-play game. And Mad Max, while it's mature, had that action that we liked. It's rough and tumble world versus that military. It's just hard-hitting, visceral, tactile sort of action. And then this is the crown jewel of our tonal communication, we'll say. This is done by a fantastic artist named Heath. It's just instantly was a touchstone for the whole team. It captured that adventure. You're out there with your buddies in this epic environment. So make sure you're focused on having this piece for the whole team, not just the art team, but for the whole team to really rally behind and focus and understand the feeling that you're going for. Like, print it out, put it on the wall, put it on the background of the slideshows. Oh yeah, so you notice it's back there. I was foreshadowing. And just make sure it's visible to the whole team at all times. So in summary, just it's important to lock down the tone as soon as possible. And it does take a lot of reinforcement. Like, just sending out a doc doesn't do much. You have to know it. You have to preach it almost daily for a while until that tone sets in and solidifies in people's minds. And then once everyone kind of gets it, then you kind of hit this critical mass where everyone gets it. And maybe there's some stragglers, but everyone helps them get focused in a direction. Another quick tip, characters are a huge product for us. They touch, I want to say, every department inside of our team. So we made this checklist that just has all the things we need to be thinking about. This way you're thinking about the character holistically and nothing really slips through the cracks. So, like, we had, I think, 28 points, and it was a living, breathing document that we're always refining. I think we ended up on 28, and we'll do multiple passes on it. So, like, the story guys and other key people would get in early and try to get a rough idea of what the character was going to be, and then concepts like, okay, I think I get it, let me do some sketches, and then that would feed back into it, and we could fill it out a bit more. For instance, like, there's 13 points here that are just for the visuals that are really being driven by the concept. We might have some ideas, but just let concept do their thing, riff off of it, and then we would look at it again, do it in passes, and look over it and be like, oh, okay, this is all working together. Oh, wait, why we didn't think about this, or now this doesn't work now that it's changed. It's just like a real quick glance to make sure everything is working holistically. So hopefully you can read those on the stream. So that's touching lightly on tone. Now, how do you make a strong identity? Well, design language is a great way, right? Like, you look at Spider-Verse, the movie's visually amazing. It's amazing in every way. But what if you don't have that time or manpower? You need that bang for your buck solution. Well, we relied on iconography. So if you see a lightsaber in a movie, you know what movie you're looking at, right? So what was our lightsaber? Well, that was flex screen banners. So just to explain them a little bit here, those are the long red banners that you're seeing there. They're kind of like just the TV on cloth, right? Or just the new paper that's just kind of taken for granted. It can get shot up and still work. So fictional tech-wise, it reinforced that rough and tumble world. Kind of takes a licking and keeps on ticking. And that banner format really alluded to that gladiatorial vibe we were going for. So again, multiple purposes, iconography, but also reinforcing the vibe of the world. But more importantly than that, I think is that long format, that triptych format. So 3 long bars was iconic. And I had to really defend against that. Like, people, because there's a lot of information that's hard to fit on there. People wanted to make jumbotrons, or we called them gladiator cards because they were more like player cards, like baseball cards or magic cards. But I really had to fight for this because I knew that these banners were going to instantly make the game recognizable once you saw them in world, in menu, in marketing. You put that everywhere. Let that be the iconography that really drives the identity of the game. And it ended up being a really economical solution for us. And I mean, I wanted to just geek out on flex screen, like this banner tech. Okay, cool. So it's like a screen that's flexible. You can cut it and it still works. So like, people will like carve out their own custom stuff, like pictures of their family, all the like secondary information you would want on your gun. And just like, oh, okay, cool. So like, when it gets shot up, it behaves like this, and when it rips this way, and all of that was cool, but it was stuff that we didn't have time for. Just have to save it for the sequel. I personally had to just take that piece of buffalo and put it in the freezer for next time, and just really refocus on what was most important, which was keeping it iconic. So faces are also iconic. I know it's kind of silly. It seems obvious, but we went 2 games before we really started to tap into the value of adding faces into the game. People are just hardwired to remember faces. So we put a lot of effort into injecting more personality and faces into Apex. On for double duty. It also, whenever people say see faces, they automatically think that there's going to be more story there, and a lot of fans crave that even in a multiplayer game. So it helped us out in that way too. So that's kind of the main components of our Apex's identity. So on to appeal. So obviously appeal falls largely on the art team's shoulders. So how do you make a game appealing on a tight schedule with a small team? well, we have more faces, so let's make those faces like really work for us, make it an appealing game. If you want people to be drawn to faces more, it really helps to make them stylized. Like the simpler you make the face, the more obvious those character demeanors are, and their personality comes out a lot more. I feel like an extreme example of this is Pathfinder, where it's just this graphic read. You know exactly what he's thinking. It just works out great because it's such a simple read. And then the art team, when doing this stylization, they did a really good job of pushing for the best of both worlds. On one hand, it does have this realism that adds value, that suspension of disbelief, but then like just the subtleties of it, they are able to get a simplicity and an exaggeration out of it at the same time. So they did a great job of finding a good balance there. And another double duty alert, doing stylized faces helps with production times too. So noise control adds a lot of appeal. Details create a lot of authenticity, but too much detail hurts. It just becomes a lot of noise and it's hard to parse. For Apex, we really focused on giving players a place for their eyes to rest, just for that more pleasant read. And the key here is just balancing, right? You want the details, but you also need places that are simplified. So focused on that for Apex. Also in our maps, players are going to be going for hours at a time. So you need to make it appealing and easy on the eyes. Players can only handle so much oppression before they just kind of visually get exhausted and like, I can't play this game anymore. I'm just thinking of Half-Life right now. I played Half-Life way longer than I should have last night, and I'm like, oh, that thing is oppressive all the time, but it's so awesome. But for multiplayer games where you can't just be going forever, it's a good idea to keep it more appealing. They're finding high key values, good color combos, good color palette. Just keep it appealing, I guess, is the key there. And their solution also didn't just make the world more appealing. It helps with target acquisition, eye fatigue, when it's really contrasty in a multiplayer game and you're like looking for targets all over your screen. It's hard when it's contrasty. And it also helped mitigate our lighting inaccuracies. Like if you were to just look at the lighting mode, you might notice that some of the rocks are not lighting the same next to each other. And so having that compressed range that we're working within kind of mitigated those errors. And atmosphere. You want it to be pleasant and appealing. Add atmosphere. It's the easiest thing to do. So in our engine, we don't have all the bells and whistles, but we do have vertical fog controls. We have directional fog that you can have come from the sun. And you really compositionally want to be thinking about these as gradients across the screen. So the vertical fog, goes top to bottom. The sun goes from left to right on the screen. You don't want to have it so wide that you're not really seeing the gradient. And this just really helps adding a sophistication and keeps it from looking flat and adds to the appeal. We also have those new screen space sunbeams up in the upper left there. That was new tech for this game. But I feel like the real unsung hero of this scene is our fog cards. Like fog card here. I don't know if you guys can see my mouse or not, but yeah, there. Like we put cards of fog to really push shapes back from each other to really just make that all stand out. So real simple, easy solution, fairly cheap. And you can get really precise with your composition. And then, of course, you got particles and stuff that you can put in there. That's your nice, expensive cherry on the top. So another thing to think about when you're dealing with atmosphere is trying to create lost edges. So you see down in the bottom left, that banner kind of goes behind the smoke. That sort of thing. In painting, it's called lost lost and found edges. But that'll just like instantly 2x the interest and appeal on something. So again, atmosphere, king of economic appeal, I would say. All right, and lastly, we have readability. So we are a class-based shooter, so you need to know what character abilities you're about to fight against. So, we designed the characters to have really strong silhouettes. We go even further. We have a strong Fresnel rim light on them. You can see in the right image, you don't see it all that much, but as you back up, the character on the left, you can see that rim really starting to hit hard. So it's fairly common technique, but ours is on pretty strong. We crank it up pretty heavy because, again, thinking of the user experience, you don't care how good an enemy looks if you're getting killed by them because you can't see them. That's way more detrimental to the game. So again, user experience comes first, and we make those visual sacrifices to make it fun and feel good. In the environment, just to contrast it with how we typically like to light things, like I ripped this from Jake Virginia, one of our environment artists, ArtStation page. Thanks, Virginia. But you can see, like on Titanfall, when it's a single-player game, we get super dark in the shadows. We love lighting almost noir style in our single-player, but we just could not have that for Apex with really open grounds, really long sight lines. You needed the characters to pop off of that background. And one quick tip, in Apex, especially when we're right out of the gates, we only had one environment, this high key environment where everything's lit fairly brightly. And we ended up using the menus to contrast against that. You're always looking for ways to kind of bounce around just to keep things from being monotonous. So don't forget, like, if you're in an environment that's going to look the same, you can use your menus to pull yourself out of that monotony. And just behind the scenes, these banners in the smoke on the dark on the left, that was supposed to be like before you run onto the field or run into the bright gladiator arena, you're kind of in that cave, that little staging area beforehand. That was what that was originally supposed to be. But we ran out of time, so we'll save it for the sequel, I guess, that cool run-up. So there are a lot of things to juggle as an art director, but you want to attack these basics early and continue to keep an eye out for any crises that you can turn into opportunities to reinforce these basics. So you have very simple basics, and anytime a problem comes up, be like, okay, how can I solve this and reinforce these basics over here? So that's pretty much how we shipped Apex Legends with a small team in a small amount of time. However, we are a live service game, so let me touch on how we've been tackling that post-launch support. Again, 50 million players came through our door in the first month, so you can imagine all the cheaters and the fraud and servers being pushed to their limits. It's a lot for a small team. And I mean, the player base is insatiable. You think, like, from a developer standpoint, it's like, oh, we just made this movie. Here's a movie. But the players are expecting this constant feed of content as if it was like a TV series or something. So our small team was not equipped to just crank out large amounts of quality progression content. On top of that, we love showing our fans that we're dedicated to supporting the game, right? Like, we're always coming out with free new maps and new modes and features. And personally, what I have been up to, which is constantly making visual improvements. So it's things like this where it pulls me away from servicing the players' needs. These are just things that we feel as developers we want to do. So hopefully you can tell the difference between these two. Which one looks better? So There are other challenges also. I know we're already in these seasons, but I like the symmetry of the slide, so don't give me too much guff. But there's other challenges on top of those challenges too, which is this game is going to be around for a while, and the Apex team is eventually going to want to move on, right? So in classic Respawn fashion, we're solving both of these problems with one solution, bang for the buck solution. It means we're ramping up our internal EA teams, other EA teams. We're getting our outsourcing studios to help out and help potentially take over the ownership of large parts of the title. Luckily, we have a well understood game now. We have lots of processes in place to help make those products. So scaling it up and handing off the reins, while still a lot of work, should be made possible. We're hoping. It's looking pretty good. And hopefully this will allow us to stay a small, fluid team that can go off and look elsewhere to find more fun and make games that feel good. And that's it for me.
Great. So we are going to make a 30 seconds break, and we are going to the chat scene.
Hi, everybody.
Hi. So this was amazing talk. Most of all, it's great because if someone is from the indie studios here watching this, or you have a friend, you should share it, because I have heard so many amazing stuff, and the whole process of creating such an amazing game in just that short of amount of time, and also a small team. So definitely also a few little leaks for maybe the future seasons, I hope. So I'm also a big fan of it. So if you have any questions, let us know in the comments. First of all, I will ask a few questions. How do you receive your feedback? That's why I wanted to ask you.
For the art or the game?
And also for the art, and for definitely also for the game. So both of them.
For the game, we have a dedicated community manager who is just constantly trawling all of the avenues that communication comes to us. He's very engaged with the community and getting feedback. So he has his finger on the pulse in terms of what the pain points are, what people really like. So we have really good communication with our community. And then on the art side, a lot of it is internal. We don't get a whole lot of feedback from the community on the art, but there's enough critical people in the building that we hear loud and clearly when something is or is not working, especially if it's affecting gameplay.
Great. So here is one question from Angelche. I was specifically impressed with the environment you have created, indoors and outdoors. What does it take well, too many questions. What does it take to be a decent environment artist? That was a fast one.
Thank you for the compliment. Our environment artists, they're really good generalists. They can do a lot of things. Again, we texture, we do modeling. We work in the engine. We're world building. So at our company, I can only speak for us and what we look for. But we're looking for somebody who can can do all of those things. And I think more in general, just to become a great artist, is being able to take the feedback, and if somebody has a critique of it, really on processing it and figuring out how you can do better next time.
Okay, so can you read the question here? The next one will be Aero Forum. Can you read the green one?
Throughout the game, considering that the art team was made up of 40 artists, which pipeline, workflow, engine, software did you use to make the models and textures? We use, okay, there's a few questions in there. Keeping the art style cohesive. It's a lot of people riffing off of each other. Again, we're all playing the game at the same time. So when somebody makes something, like, oh, that's cool, I want to take that style and plug it in over here, so things start to meld together. It's not a lot of, okay, here's the grand scheme plan and now everybody execute on it. It's a lot of like, okay, we need to go in this direction. Somebody did something really fast. Everyone else is like, oh, that's cool. I'm going to take my asset, modify it a little bit to make it work with that. So it's a lot of improvisation versus scripted. You talk movies versus improvisation. So we're more of an improv team than a script working off of a script. The other question in there, pipeline, workflow, engine. Engine is proprietary. It's based off of Half-Life. We were talking about Half-Life. Based off of Half-Life, the Valve guys were kind enough to let us use their engine, and it's super duper heavily modified. Like, you even recognize it. Like, we don't even have their Hammer editor anymore. In fact, we fairly quickly switched that over to what we were used to, which was more of a Quake-based editor. And let's see, software, Maya, ZBrush, a lot of Substance Designer nowadays, a little bit of Photoshop, and I feel like I'm missing something. And then, like, world building, we place models in our proprietary editor. That's kind of Quake-based.
Yeah, sure. If you missed the talk from Substance, also they have made some nice tip and tricks for the Substance Designer. So it was amazing talk, and also a few scripts were added to I think it was just above advanced techniques for let's say for the technical department or some AAA games. So you should find it interesting. We have more questions now.
Yeah. Which one should we do?
Let's say question in terms of art direction and game design. When actually does the art starting rolling out? After the concept brief part of the GDD done, of course, this question is from the starting from scratch standpoint. Thank you.
Yeah, so this kind of goes back to our improvisation with, like, whenever we decided to, let's see if I can recall this whole journey, but whenever we started to be like, oh, you know what, like, we want to make a battle royale game, it becomes then, okay, we need to do it in a short amount of time. I don't know if this is going to be a super helpful answer, because coming from Titanfall 2 is like, okay, we have this buffalo here, let's start hacking it up and putting that buffalo into our game. So you'll see a lot of assets in a different context in Apex than they were in Titanfall and Titanfall 2. So we had a little bit of a head start on the art side, had a little bit of a style. We knew there were certain things that we wanted to retouch on the new assets, going into this new context of a much wider, bigger open areas. We wanted there to be less noise, so taking those assets and kind of de-noising them. So that's kind of how we started the art on the environment side. On the characters and weapon side, a lot of it is just like, well, what would be cool? Like, having talks with designers really fast, like, well, okay, we know we need machine guns, and we ended up reusing assets too, but okay, what are some of the new assets that we can bring in? Talking with design, seeing what's cool. They're going to be experimenting on their own end, and so they'll show you early on, I'm thinking this will be fun or whatever, and we'll be like, oh, okay, cool. We have a weapon that didn't get used, and we can use it, or they'll just mock it in, and we'll start making modifications to it as the weapon goes. So the design is being figured out, and the art is kind of being figured out simultaneously. But in a rough sketch, the better example of that is even on our characters, where we have a very clear process of like, okay, we have concept for the character. We kind of figure out the nugget of what that character is going to be, have concept do some passes, and then whatever we're gravitating towards, we'll end up doing what's called a proxy. So, we'll mass in that concept, and you want to be able to, that really helps you feel out that character, and understand like, oh, okay, it's got a good silhouette. It stands out from the other characters. It really captures what this character is all about. And then once we get that into a state where we're comfortable, we're like, okay, we're feeling confident about this character's direction, then we'll start going in and doing the final version of it.
Okay, so most of the questions were answered. Now I have, I think, one. What made you decide to make it for 60 players per game and not 100 like the most battle royale games? It's because of the map size?
A lot of it is, it's just all technical. Our engine wasn't designed to run 100, so we were pretty happy that we got 60 out of it. And then, our map size, we were playing conservatively. Again, 16 times bigger than anything we had made before, and there wasn't really any tech to do it. A lot of it was just hard work and dedication and discipline on the environment art team, and just the whole team as in general. We did get features throughout, but early on, you kind of, if you don't know that the tech is going to be there, try to play it safe. So, but it gives it its own flavor too.
Okay, so I can read it. Communication and organization wise, given that you are a small team, would you have described your team method of work? Alleged something, yeah.
Being a small team, we are always biased to not having a lot of production. With that said, we all agree that we did not have enough production. Like I personally had a very tough time seeing the whole picture and the scope of things along the way. In terms of getting people all on the same page, a lot of that is culture. We're a fairly small team, so you're generally seeing what everybody else is working on. Some things do slip through the cracks. We don't specifically have scrums or agile waterfalling whatevers. It would have been nice to have, but we were pretty production light. A lot of it was just keeping an eye out for what was going on. There's probably a better answer for that, but that's all I got for now.
Nice. Also, we have some good questions. Also, can you read Kitze_Kitze to stay competitive with the Warzone and Valorant? I don't think I can pronounce it. Do you plan to getting the servers at least 60 Hz? Also, will you even describe SBMM in normal matching making?
Might be outside the scope of the art talk. I would feel more comfortable letting a programmer talk about all of that stuff. It would be great. I'll say that. I don't know where it falls on our priority list, though. Sorry.
Also, this one is good. How do you guys feel when most of the players use the lowest texture settings when you spend so much time making them look as good as possible?
It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking on one end, but I'll be honest with you. Like I'll end up turning down the settings because I want to win. So I end up doing the same thing sometimes too. But it's there for the players that want that immersion. They have the rigs that can support it. So we love making beautiful art. So there are people out there appreciating it. But I totally get it when people want to just win and they're willing to do anything to do that, except for cheat.
Okay, so we have here other question. What type of employees is Respawn looking for? Especially as artists in specific field or artists with decent skills in more fields, including programming?
Artists with programming skills, I think we are looking for a tech artist right now, but I think the best thing to do is to just check out our website, respawn.com. I think will get you to like everything that we're looking for, and it should have a pretty good breakdown of what we need.
Okay, so I have a question of my own. Because you're an art director, so do you have some word to say before the human resources ask you, let's say you need an environment artist. So you search for them or they find it for you. So what's your team made of? Yes, do you have a decision when the team was creating?
Let me see if this answers the question. So we do have recruiting. Respawn has been growing at a really fast rate. So recruiting is spread across, we have 3 teams at Respawn now. So we have to rely a lot on, what's the word? People being like, oh, I got a buddy that, a referral, right? So like, oh, I got a buddy over here that will work. And so we end up relying on our artists to really kind of look for people. I'm not all that great, as you can tell. I'm not on social media a lot. So like, I'm not out there like, hey, come on. So a lot of there are guys that like to do that stuff all the time. So we kind of rely on them and our recruiters. Does that answer the question? Or
yes,
you ask?
Yes, for sure.
Okay.
Okay, so I have also one question about some of your colleagues mentioned about the heat maps. So when some of the players drop, so if there is, let's say, more players dropping at one spot, how do you, let's say, collaborate that?
Balance that out. I don't know if you could hear my children are losing their minds downstairs. I'm sorry if you can hear them. So balancing them out is more of a design question, but I do have a bit of insight in it. So we do have heat maps, and we can do that by, mostly the easiest way to do it is by just taking the loot out. Oh my goodness, they're going crazy. By taking the loot out of the area we're putting. We did have this issue that we were calling running hot for a while, which means like everyone was just jumping out of the plane right away. So trying to incentivize the player to, wait a while and survive a little bit longer. Right? Jumping in, trying to come out on top of that fight right there, and then you'll be ahead of everybody else. So just trying to incentivize players to last longer. So there's like meta things in there. There's we're also looking at we do map updates where Leviathans have smashed down. Well, that's also to change the map in ways that we feel need to be changed based off of the feedback that we've been getting.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it helps a lot because I have seen it. Some of your colleagues mentioned in some of the live streams. Also, how long does it take to develop a character design? Where do you guys look for inspiration?
Ooh, okay. First part of that. A lot longer than I thought it was going to. Once we fleshed out our whole process and kind of ironed out the kinks, man, I feel like it's like 6 months probably. It starts off as just, hey, here's an idea for a character. Maybe it comes from design where they're like, we need a character that does this sort of ability that counters these sort of abilities, or makes the game deeper by adding this type of mechanic. Starts that way, and it's like, okay, you start thinking about like how can we wrap a personality around that sort of thing, and then it goes off the concept, then it comes back and we flesh it out more, and then it goes to concept again, and then a proxy, and then we make sure that working together as a package before we put the time and effort into making a final model and get all the animations. And then before a character is done, we need to have all its legendaries, all of its extra skins, all the dialogue. So all of that takes about, I would say 6 months. It might even be longer, honestly. It's pretty involved.
Okay, great. So I think we can have 2 more questions, or you wanted to say something more?
It was how long, and totally forgot. Okay, so I was sorry if I didn't answer that one fully. So do we lose motivation during the project? Yes, there's usually a slump in the middle of the project. Personally, I don't, because I've been through Tony Hawk, I've been through Gun, Modern Warfare 2, Titanfall 2. All of these games, they always doesn't look like you're going to make it. And again, if you remember my graph, it just goes up. So I personally always have faith and can stay motivated, because I'm like, all right, this is going to look good. Right at the end, it's all going to come together. So personally, I don't lose motivation, but there's definitely developers where they're like, this I don't want to be working on this anymore. So it's definitely something to look out for. And you have to make sure that you're set up for success to go up that curve on the end. And you have to know what to look for, know what to expect.
Also, I was amazed when I saw some of the voiceovers, the people that were hired to present their character, and also was some from the native culture. So they were pretty amazed to interact with them, and also as well to put some more characters. So deeply from the trailers we cannot see more like a deep story, but behind it definitely there is even more through the skins, through the environment. So I love the season 3 trailer. It was amazing. But can you tell us more about this season 5 or season 6?
I wish I could. No, I can't. If it's not already up, I can't talk about it, sadly. I wish I could. There's some cool stuff coming up.
I hope we can see even more better modes. So also one more question about the third person mode. Did you have any difficulties creating it?
That's more of a programmer question. Like, we did everything we did on the art side. Something tells me we kind of already had a third person. It just needed to get tweaked a little bit, just to get it shippable. But yeah, I don't remember hearing big gripes. I think that there's things we can do to improve on it too, if I'm not mistaken. So hopefully it keeps getting better and better.
Okay, so we can go with a last question. So will there be a new map next season, or an updated version of Discord 1? And as well, there's one more similar question. How long does it take to design a map?
So again, I can't really speak to any specifics on what's coming. I mean, you can follow a pattern. You know what we like to do. So you could probably expect more of that. And then the other question was, how long does it take to make a map, to design a map? I'm going to take that as just taking it from beginning to end. There's the design side of things, and then we have to art it and put effects on it and light it and everything. But to go through that whole process, 8 months, maybe more, and that's with our 10, 11, maybe 12 environment artists cranking away on it. And again, they're kind of working in parallel with the designers, going in there, making sure that everything on the macro scale is well balanced, and then going in there and making good firefights in individual areas while we're off making art that then gets transplanted on top of it. So that whole process takes about, I want to say 8 months. That might even be longer too. I might be selling that short.
Nice. So we have an amazing presentation and as well, for sure, amazing questions. Thank you a lot for presenting the great stuff, because from some of the indie studios that are watching the stream, it will go to be very educated how to start a game, how to prepare their team, and as well as to find motivation, definitely find motivation and some leaks for the players as well. So thanks, Todd, for being here.
For all the awesome questions.
Great. So
Thanks.
So, see you in the next edition.
All right. See you guys.
Thank you again for being here. Sorry for the mic, because always I'm changing it when he's speaking, so there's not any echo. So thanks again. We are going to have a new presentation on 20th March. So stay tuned and also hit the subscribe button, and see you later. Bye.